Well, it's good to be here, and it's always awesome to connect with new folks, and um, and then definitely to step into a new space to be able to share experiences, accomplishments, etc., and hope folks be able to walk away with some kind of inspiration. um, a lot of us come from different paths, and we have different directions that we take. And when those directions kind of ends, some of us find ourselves into some really intense type of circumstances. And depends on how we climb out of those circumstances. It all depends on um, what new direction we take and how we end up unfolding ourselves into that new situation and work with what we have to work with in order to build um, or inspire someone. It's up to us basically. Um, I was in this conversation with a buddy of mine, and he's an artist in Atlanta, Georgia, awesome artist, and he goes throughout the city and he finds trash, and he takes this trash and brings it to a studio, and he takes the trash and starts getting really creative, and he takes the trash and starts creating flies for fly fishing, and he used these to go out and catch fish. And so if anybody spending time fly fishing or familiar with the sport fly fishing, there's this thing we call match to hatch. And really what it means is that you take your flies, which are imitating insects, and you match the insects that are happening on the water to catch fish. And that's how you catch fish. That's traditional, historically, what everybody knows in the sport of fly fishing. What this gentleman is doing, he's basically challenging that, and he's disrupting what you've been told to do or what you should do when you're matching a hatch. And his thing is, I'm my own inspiration, and I'm gonna do what feels right, and I'm gonna go ahead and catch my fish how I feel. He's becoming his own master in what he's doing, and he's very successful. He's actually taking Cheeto bags and taking the Cheeto bags and scrapping it up and turning flies from a Cheeto bag, and he's going out and catching trout. You know, um, I identify with that really, really well due to my background of moving through the world and knowing how do you move through the world in whatever circumstance that comes in front of your life. How do you deal with that, and how do you punch through with that, and taking creativity, and then actually you become the manifesto into that whole space, and you start to create as you're moving forward. And I had to learn that in the most darkest times in my life, when as a combat vet, served in 2 wars, and I got hit really hard to where my PTSD took the toll on me, and so I literally lost everything. When talking about everything, I literally lost everything, and I was living right on the streets, right in Portland, Oregon. I was in that space where actually going to get food to McDonald's, I would go and basically dumpster dive to get food. That's where I was at. And borderline committing a crime, borderline for doing whatever, but I didn't do it. I had to stay true. And I may have relied on a lot of my military training of just being disciplined and knowing how to stay focused and seeing through the mission and following through what you need to follow through to make things work. Through some help that came through, but this fight was an individual fight that I had to deal with. Some people will probably commit a crime. Some people will probably just give up, and some people will probably go and take their own lives. Which I attempted that, and I found myself right in the VA on the hill up here, serving 7 days in a psych ward to prove to the docs that I wasn't going to take a firearm and shoot myself. And I was founded actually on the Clackamas River. It was because I was drugged up with a lot of heavy medications that the VA was giving us, and brown bags. Anybody ever been with vets, et cetera? But there's a brown bag that they give you, and it's a bunch of freaking medications that you have to toss. and take to keep your head straight, to keep you from not having nightmares, keep you from not having depression left and right. My weight went up to like around 350, and it was crazy, and so that was a dark moment. But what happened was there was a person that put a rod in my hand and took me to the river and said, "This is what I used to come to when I was going through my divorce." And here I am standing on the river, glassy-eyed. I'm glassy-eyed. I can't even see straight because I'm so drugged up, and I can't even, don't even know what's going on. Everything's blurred and stuff, and the only thing I can see was like a little bit of greeny. But when they showed me what to do, and I took the rod and I started to fish, I hooked it on this fish, and I started hooting, hollering all over the place, and and I think the bums in the park saying, "Who's that guy?" Everybody, but like literally, I was hooting and hollering like crazy, but that excitement and that energy and what was going through my veins and my body, I literally felt like all of that medication that I was putting in my system was kind of seeping out of my pores, and nature was like coming in and just like pushing that stuff out. And it was probably the most biggest moment of my life, And so I went back to the VA, talked with the VA, and they literally wrote me a prescription to stay in the outdoors more, period. And that's what I did. And I started, fly fishing more. I got really good at it, and I became a sponsor with with many companies, et cetera, and started teaching the sport. Then I started giving back, and that was a big thing for me, and started to understand like the importance of what nature is and how that can work and help people move through whatever situation that you're in. And I started combining the two, youth and veterans, but I didn't really have no following. I didn't know how no okay. So what I did was I got in my rig, because half of the time I'm telling this story, I was sleeping out of my rig. I had rods in the back, and I would go to a basketball court with a bunch of youth, and I pull my rods out, and I start casting out right there in the middle of a basketball court, because it was sort of making these really gorgeous, beautiful loops, and all the kids was like, ooh, 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 what's going on? What is that? What is that? That's how I started getting youth, and start teaching them basically. And I was basically like living art automatically, just doing what I need to do. And, over the course of time, I end up getting more help and going back to the VA and getting my benefits, because got major back pay for 7 years in and out of the VA hospital. And I self-invested into my first organization, which was Soul River, basically. And I had this veteran style mindset, because a lot of us vets, we're kind of like wild animals, and and we kind of do our thing, and so my attitude was like I didn't really want to step in a space to work for anyone. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to call my own shots and create my own path here, and that's what I started out doing, and over the course of time, start building this organization and reaching out to the communities and making and creating better spaces for our youth, especially youth of color, to be able to step into and connect to nature, using veterans as a big brother, big sister mentor. I can kind of call them like life coaches, basically. And I bring these worlds together. And a lot of people, I had so much, people like challenging me and saying, "Chad, that doesn't work. That's like mixing oil and water." I said, "No, it does work. They're both soldiers. You have a soldier that's fought for the country, and then you have a young soldier that's fighting for themselves, and you bring these two worlds together. It's like an iron sharpening iron process. You're forging goodness, you're forging healthiness, you're forging greatness, and that's really was my walk for a while. And I continue, and we call them deployments, yes, the term comes from the military, but we changed that name. And what that means to us is that we go and identify our public lands, wild spaces, wherever there's issues, turmoil. And then that gives me the opportunity to take in something bad into something good. And so what is bad, that goes into a curriculum. And then from that curriculum, that goes into the hands of the vets. the vets use that curriculum like teachers basically that help engage and raise the awareness of the issues that are happening on our land or happening with our indigenous brothers and sisters or with our fresh water. And so we bring these worlds together where that youth is serving that vet and that vet is serving that youth. You know, there's this exchange of kind of like humanity giveness that's happening between the both of them. One is getting a big brother, big sister life coach, and the veteran by default is getting purpose, 100%. However that falls on that veteran. And we started off in doing many deployments. We do so many deployments all over the United States. Our biggest deployments head up to the Arctic Circle, and that's kind of like the youth quest, and which are youth leaders that heads up there, and I spearhead expeditions in the Arctic Circle, where literally, if anybody's ever seen the movies or how expeditions look, it's the real deal. I've raised the money. Everything's zero cost for all youth and all vets, and we do these over-the-top expeditions, getting dropped off in the middle of nowhere, and how I got into that space and going back to the veterans, like how, you know, I'm in this position where I have to create every single thing I do. There's no such thing of a mountain in front of me, or no such thing of a no. And so I was literally speaking for Patagonia, and I was talking about, in the next, I'm going to the top of the world. I'm taking 30 youth and veterans up to the top of the world. And my partner said, well, Chet, how are you going to do that? I said, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. You know, I made a promise, but I'm going to see it through, you know. And so what I did was I went down that path, and I got a whole lot of doors closed in front of me. The government closed doors in front of me, left and right. U.S. Fish and Wildlife closed the door in front of me. And they said, no, you can't do it. And on top of that, there's only a max limit of, you can have like 10 people up in the Arctic in a space like that because it's so sensitive, et cetera. So again, I called up the U.S. Navy. I talked to some buddies of mine. I said, hey, can you fly C-130s into the Arctic Circle and drop us off? And that's when they thought I was literally crazy and everything, you know. And buddy of mine said, yeah, we could do that. We can do this maneuver, and we can fly C-130s, get youth and vets in the belly of the plane. We'll drop you guys off and treat it as an exercise. You know, and I said, cool, bet, no problem. We got this, you know. And so when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife heard that there's this guy that's actually organizing C-130s to fly in youth and vets and everything, they said, you know what, we're seeing what's going on, and we can't really stop you, but we like to now sit down and have a conversation with you and talk with you, you know. And so they became a partner of mine, and they gave me the access, and I was the first one at that time, and probably still today, the first African American to own a permit to guide up to 25, 30 youth and veterans, or just people, into the Arctic Circle. You know, and so it was really awesome. Got that letter from the White House, basically gave me, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. Well, it's time to rock and roll with this, you know. So we started moving youth and veterans into that space and doing these like over-the-top expeditions and connecting with indigenous communities, with the Gwich'in people, and also with the Inupiat people, which is further up north. And so these deployments started becoming cultural immersions into indigenous communities, where they have this opportunity to actually experience and see climate change, or you want to call it climate science, et cetera, happening on ground zero, literally in front of them. You know, the textbooks is out the door now. This is the real deal, and they are basically amongst the community. Some of the vets, they participate in going on traditional hunts, going after the caribou, are overseeing and looking at the great caribou migration. You know, thousands and thousands migration of caribou, like moving through the Arctic Circle. It's just like a tundra that's trampling the tundra. It's unbelievable of what nature can show you and what's going on up there. Unbelievable, you know. And so I continue with this, and now I have youth leaders that's coming through. They're graduating. They're moving into internships. You know, and it's really amazing. Returning veterans come through, and you know, and as I'm moving forward, it's like I'm not done yet. I'm continuing to move forward, and I think that's, you know, one of the things I've learned even from our hardship or circumstances, is how we have to, how we or I have to learn how to manifest what's inside of me and make that work. I don't identify as a nonprofit leader. People put me in that place. I don't identify as a photographer, but people put me in that place, or a filmmaker, or I even don't identify as an angler. This guy, he emailed me, texted me through Instagram, and he wanted to do an interview, and he said, hey, I'm trying to find, people who identify with angling. No, I don't identify with angling. That's not my box. I kind of identify really much more as a creative director. I'm inspiration. When I walk into something, when I'm doing something, there's no rules and no walls that's going to stop me from being creative, of doing what I need to do. And what I'm finding myself doing is creating really unique spaces for, people of color, indigenous, and using my talent to help elevate different voices in these spaces into the public, And so, but, again, as I'm fighting and doing what I'm trying to do, I also have my mountains. And one of those mountains I had to come across is that I was out on the Clackamas River and fly fishing, and all of a sudden this guy walks out to the river and he tells me to get off his river. And I said, no, I'm not going to get off your river. And I looked at him. It was probably maybe like 2 football field lengths down. I kind of looked at him, and I continued to fish. He took his firearm and he shot in the air to scare me, and I didn't budge. I still continued to fish, and then he took his firearm and shot at me to attempt to kill me. And that was a really intense situation for me because, that opened up a lot of my PTSD. And now it kind of set me back a little bit because I'm unraveling, and I don't know if anybody ever had the feeling of getting shot at, but it's a scary thing. I went through a lot of that stuff in the military, and I thought I put that to bed, but when he shot at me, and even the warning shot a little bit, it kind of like, made me a little bit on the edge and everything. But when he shot at me, it was a scary moment, and I was scraping and took my dog axe and, trying to take cover, hitting the ground, and trying to get out of the situation. And so I had to go through a lot of therapy, and so while I'm doing a lot of this, keep in mind is all this stuff I'm doing, I do keep people around me. I keep, therapists and massage, people, and acupuncture is part of my lifestyle, especially when you're working with not just indigenous cultures and at risk, and you're dealing with many different racial issues, et cetera, but you got to know how to be able to support yourself and protect yourself and, and keep yourself centered as you're doing this kind of work, And so here I am back going through a lot of my therapy and trying to recenter myself, and I had to take a break for a little bit. Now I stepped back out, maybe a month later, I think. I don't know how much time it took me though, but step back out and I say, you know what? I'm going to create a new organization. And this organization is going to center around basically making sure that people are safe when they go into the outdoors. All people, and yes, it focuses on BIPOC leaders, LGBTQ communities, underserved voices, women, etc. Everybody has that right of the freedom to roam and all access to be able to do what you want to do in the outdoors and explore and create beautiful memories, period. Okay, so and no one does not deserve to face any type of aggression. And so Love is King was born. And when Love is King was born, started working through that organization and making it happen. And by the way, I don't advise anyone to run 2 organizations at the same time. That's another conversation. It's a lot. It's a lot. But it's doing it. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It focuses on communities, and it helps communities basically bridge into the outdoors. On a really simple, basic level, basically, right? Just to enter outdoors and feel safe and comfortable. And then it also has a second initiative to where it focuses on BIPOC leaders. There's a lot of folks, not just of color, but there's a lot of people that just kind of wonders, how do I get into advocacy, the conservation space, and like if I want to raise my voice and support indigenous communities, et cetera, or support our wildlife, how do I get involved with that? How do I do that? And people went to school for that. There's some, and they find their ways in those spaces. But there's a lot of people don't understand how to do that. And so this initiative is called Operation Roam, and it's focused on bringing adult leaders into a conservation space, not just to recreate, but to cross over into a conservation and show them how to use their voice as an advocacy leader for indigenous communities. And so now when they come to it's a grit boot camp. I designed it, and it's literally like a boot camp, and we do everything. My classroom is in the Arctic Circle, and so some of these leaders that come through, their outdoor experience on a scale of 1 to 10 is probably like a 2 to a 4, and that's okay, but there's a lot of grit. They have to carry a 60-pound backpack. They have to know how to walk through that terrain, hit that tundra, that pain and that uncomfortableness. We learn how to welcome that, understand, because now you're connecting to the land, to the real outdoors, et cetera. And then that leads them to spending 5 days with an indigenous community up in the Arctic as well. And they're learning from the chiefs, they're learning from the community, they're giving back by helping, build gardens, et cetera, eating the food, learning how to, eat their ways. Eat how their ways is used to prepare their food, et cetera. So when they come out, they pair themselves with a conservation group. And when they get with that conservation group, they fall right into the work that conservation group is doing to help raise the awareness of the, whatever project they're working on. This gives these leaders an opportunity to bring their voice to the table. And what I just said and shared is that we are disrupting historically of where BIPOC folks was never actually invited to the table when it comes to creating our rules, rights, and regulations from a policy standpoint that relates to our land that we recreate on, right? So now we are able to bring these many diverse colors of voices to the table, sitting in front of congressionals, talking with senators, et cetera. One thing is to recreate, and that's great, but where I get giddy at is actually seeing much more diverse voices in these spaces on Capitol Hill, talking with congressional members about, like, this is what we can do, or this is my experience, or this is what I feel like we need to do, et cetera, et cetera. Now we got a full collaboration, and we got full representation happening even on top of the hill, basically, And so again, it's a process, right? And me as, a founder or two, and then outside of the work that I do is advocacy work. And a lot of my advocacy work goes right back in me using creativity, but I'm stepping in new spaces. And so there's no books that I need to look at or I can look at that's going to support me. So I got to create this as I'm moving forward, solving problems creatively, right? And working with indigenous communities, and I'm doing films and using film as a way to help elevate these voices, and bring them down to the lower 48. And then a lot of these, how I move through these spaces, there are also places where I work with vets. And again, I lean into vets and I do these, I would say, call them like under the radar type of work missions that ties in with conservation spaces, where we go in under the radar and we go into the oil countries. A lot of people have no idea what's happening on top of the world, but we got ConocoPhillips, you got all these major oil companies happening that's actually injecting radioactive waste into the land that's been going on since the 40s. And you got indigenous communities that are getting sick. But what's happening is also within the indigenous world is that they've been fighting, and they've been doing great of fighting that fight. But at the same time, there's people on the outside of how we're going to create change is going to take us as a body. And so again, I'm being a creative director of how can I basically take what's going on in real time, and also lean into my partners and knock on the doors, even to our, corporate brands, and also, even government, and bringing them into the fold and say, listen, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to do it, and this is how I want to deliver it back to the lower 48. And so it's been really an interesting journey, but but there's a power in building community. If what I'm speaking to, I carry my community. My community, it's not just extends as a community of youth and veterans, but also in that community, it extends into partners and how I build these relationships. Now it's to the point where I can make a phone call and call up a, Grail, that's just a water bottle company right here in Portland, Oregon. But I can say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to do this deal up in the Arctic. I'm trying to get this going. I need $55,000. Boom, no problem. We got you. Those are the kind of relationships. But it also goes into creating social wealth, and that's another part of things that I've learned along this process of creating this interesting type of social wealth, that it may not come in the form of having a bigger bank account, et cetera, but it comes in the form of relationships with a value and how they can bring that kind of social wealth in that help you continue to do that kind of work. And then your outcome really comes out from your mission that you started, and they see that, but it's a delicate walk for sure. It's a serious deal, because you're putting so much of yourself in the forefront, and you are the person that has to deliver. And so that comes down to how do you align yourself with the right kind of people who's going to support you and have your back even when things go south. And when things go south, you have to know how to navigate that and keep your head cool. And there's been a lot of times that I've been in situations where things go south and I put myself far out there, but I have to navigate that and bring that back, right? So it's definitely interesting how life has unfolded for myself, but also, with folks out there listening and what you're going through. It's the fact that, I really encourage, I always encourage folks, like, if you're an artist, you're a photographer, you're a writer, that's great, but you're also a creative director, and you have every opportunity to create the space, create that world of what you're about to step into, right? And help solve those problems on a humanity level, because we need more creatives and more unique individuals to step in and start helping to solve more humanity problems, and how do we work together, give back, and make things right for others. And definitely this whole thing that I speak to in past conversation I had is the ethos love of a warrior, right? And so, and when I'm talking about that type of love, I'm not talking about the relationships or the marriages, etc. I'm talking about the kind of love that you can step up for someone that you don't know who they are, and they need the help. They need that support. That's the kind of warrior type of love that I'm talking about. And that also rolls itself into solving problems for people and supporting people that you may not know where they come from. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, part of LGBTQs. The fact is that you have an opportunity and you have a special power as a creative director of your space that you're stepping into to create these kind of interesting solutions that can help people be able to move forward. And so that's kind of like where I found myself after that darkness, and what I've learned and being able to how to forge and cultivate from living on the streets to dumpster diving to moving forward and believing in my walk and what I'm able to do and what I'm able to carry through, and being creative and inspiring at the same time. I had to inspire myself. There was no cheerleaders there to help encourage me, literally none. And so, I had to find that way. And so that's something that I'll probably just end with, but yeah. Yeah.